in the outer reaches of the nebula spur, where gravity whispered rather than pulled, and the stars shimmered like specks of dust in a swirling galaxy-wide vortex, there was a planet called Xeltara, renowned across the universe as the pinnacle of culinary excellence. Xeltara was a place where alien chefs from all corners of space traveled to hone their craft. The planet's varied biomes provided every imaginable ingredient from spongy marsh fruits to the fiery cheric plants that could only be harvested under intense heat. Xeltara was home to the gastronomic elite, and within its bustling cities, food wasn't just sustenance, it was a way of life. At the heart of its capital, Oldros, stood the Stellar Feast, a famous dining institution where the galaxy's best chefs tested their limits. The kitchen was alive with sizzling sounds, steam rising from complex, multi-tiered ovens, and chefs of every shape and size expertly wielding knives, hover slicers, and plasma blenders. And in the very center of this chaos, the lead chef, Quilor, stood tall, his four shimmering arms dancing as he prepared a delicate dish of spiced rocal fish. Quilor, a Celthian, was known for his precision and skill. His translucent skin pulsed with a soft green glow whenever he felt excited or challenged. Today, his glow was particularly bright because the Stellar Feast had been graced with a rather peculiar new clientele. Humans. A species from a backwater planet on the edge of the Milky Way, they'd recently made waves in the galactic community by joining the Interstellar Union. Quilor had heard rumors about them bipedal creatures with a crude sense of taste and low tolerance for refined spices. They typically ate their food cooked, an absurd notion to many species in the Union. And yet, their arrival had piqued Quilor's curiosity. He had always prided himself on his ability to adapt his recipes to any palate, no matter how odd. He had spent the last several weeks researching humans, learning about their food preferences, their strange obsession with what they called spicy food. It seemed they had some odd attraction to a plant called chili that was mildly irritating to the mouth yet highly sought after. Standing at the back of the kitchen, Quilor watched as the group of humans entered the dining hall. There were 4 of them, 2 males and 2 females. One of the males, a large, broad-shouldered figure named Ethan, was already eyeing the menu with the kind of enthusiasm that bordered on reckless. Quilor, one of the servers, a thin, insectoid creature with multicolored wings, buzzed over to him. "The humans have requested something unique." Quilor's emerald eyes narrowed in curiosity. "Unique? Define." "They want something, how do they put it, spicier?" "Spicier," Quilor repeated, his glow intensifying slightly. "I have spent weeks calibrating a dish specifically designed for the human palate. It should already be on the threshold of their tolerance." The server nodded nervously. "I informed them of that, but they insisted." Quilor hummed thoughtfully. "Interesting. It seems these humans are far more adventurous than I expected. Very well, prepare the Sorok vipers and the Flarian peppers. I will create something that should exceed their request." The Sorok vipers were a rare species of sea serpent found deep in the volcanic trenches of Xeltara's oceans. Their meat was tender but laced with a natural toxin that produced an intense sensation of heat, one that only the most experienced of Xelthian chefs could tame. Combined with Flarian peppers, notorious for their ability to cause mild combustion when improperly handled, Quilor was confident this dish would push the boundaries of human tolerance without causing serious harm. Probably. He set to work, his hands a blur of motion as he chopped, seared, and sprinkled various exotic spices. A faint cloud of red smoke began to rise from the pot as the peppers released their volatile oils. The aroma was intoxicating, even to Quilor, who had prepared dishes for some of the most discerning palates in the universe. As the dish neared completion, a light vibration trembled through the air. It was Ethan, leaning against the counter of the kitchen with an eager smile plastered on his face. "So what's on the menu?" he asked, his voice booming through the room. Quilor regarded him for a moment, his translucent skin flickering between shades of green and yellow as he gauged the human's confidence. "This, Mr. Ethan, is a Sorok viper infused with Flarian peppers. It is a dish designed to challenge even the most resilient of beings." Ethan grinned wider. "Sounds perfect. We were worried it might be too mild. Spices on our planet, well, they're great, but I've heard Xeltara is on another level." Quilor resisted the urge to laugh. Mild? This dish was already pushing the limits of what was legally allowed under Interstellar Union regulations. Humans were odd creatures, he realized, their appetites for danger rivaling even the most reckless of species. The rest of the humans sat at their table, excited and oblivious to what was coming. Plates were brought out, and Quilor watched from the kitchen as they were served the viper dish, garnished with roasted flareon and pepper shards and drizzled with the incendiary sauce. The humans dug in. Ethan, being the most enthusiastic, took the first bite. For a brief moment, his expression remained neutral. But then his eyes widened, and he let out a breath that almost sounded like a hiss. His face turned red, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. The others followed, each reacting in a similar fashion, faces flushed, eyes watering and breaths becoming ragged. Yet, to Quilor's amazement, they kept eating. "That's incredible," Ethan gasped between bites. His voice sounded strained, but there was an unmistakable note of exhilaration in it. The rest of the humans nodded in agreement, their mouths on fire, but they showed no signs of stopping. If anything, they seemed to be savoring the burn, leaning into the heat with a kind of masochistic glee. They even started laughing, despite the tears streaming down their faces. Quilor blinked, stunned. He had expected them to take a bite, maybe two, and then beg for mercy. But these humans, they were actually enjoying it? Suddenly, a strange sizzling sound filled the air, and Quilor's eyes darted toward the human's table. The plate in front of Ethan had started to warp, the metal edges curling and blackening, as if exposed to intense heat. The other plates soon followed, the extreme temperature of the dish beginning to affect the molecular structure of the tableware. Ethan's fork clattered to the table as he realized what was happening. "Oh, what the—" The plates glowed faintly, and with a soft pop, one of them disintegrated, leaving behind a pile of molten steel that began dripping onto the table. Quilor, one of the other humans, a woman named Jennifer, called out nervously, "Is this supposed to happen?" Quilor rushed over, his mind racing. This had never happened before. Sure, the flareon peppers were volatile, but to melt steel? That was unheard of, even in Xelthian cuisine. "My apologies," he stammered, his glow dimming in alarm as he observed the molten remains of the plates. I may have underestimated the potency of the dish." Ethan, however, seemed unfazed. In fact, he was grinning again, wiping the sweat from his brow. "No way. That was awesome. You just melted steel with food. Best meal of my life." The other humans nodded in agreement, still wiping their watery eyes but clearly impressed. Quilor stared at them, completely baffled. These creatures, they were insane. But the chef inside him couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride. Humans were unlike any species he had ever encountered, their reckless bravery and desire for extreme flavors pushing even his skills to the limit. If this was what they considered spicy, then perhaps he had misjudged them. "I suppose," Quilor said slowly, "there is room for further experimentation." Ethan slapped him on the back, leaving a faint singe mark on Quilor's shimmering skin. "You bet. Next time, make it even hotter." Quilor stared at the melted tableware and the human's satisfied expressions. This was going to be a challenge. And he liked challenges. Quilor spent the next few moments in a daze, his translucent skin shifting to a murky brown, the Xelthian equivalent of deep contemplation. He'd never encountered a species that could not only withstand such intense heat but revel in it. The humans were unlike any clientele he had served before. There was no denying that they had a fascinating resilience, one that he both admired and found unnerving. "I believe we should take a moment before proceeding further," Quilor said carefully, watching as the humans continued to recover from their meal. Jennifer was still dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, while Ethan leaned back in his chair, a content smile plastered across his sweat-drenched face. The other two humans, Mara and Sean, had started comparing how their metal utensils were now bent beyond recognition, likely from the heat their food had radiated. Ethan, however, shook his head vigorously. "No way. That was just the appetizer, right? We came all the way across the galaxy for this. We can't stop now." Quilor's glow flickered in alarm. There may be consequences. As you've just witnessed, the dish has exceeded my original expectations. Jennifer, still sniffling, raised a hand and grinned through the pain. He's right. That was definitely hotter than anything back home. But honestly, we loved it. I mean, if we can't handle little molten metal, are we really living? Quilor stared at them in disbelief. These humans were serious. Even as their utensils warped and melted, they were asking for more. The chef inside him wanted to accept the challenge, to push the limits of his culinary mastery, but the rational part of his mind hesitated. What if this next dish caused irreparable damage? What if their request for Spicier led to a medical emergency, or worse? The other chefs around him had started whispering among themselves, their antennae and tentacles twitching with unease. Quilor had already established himself as a visionary chef, but this was unprecedented. Still, something deep within him stirred. If he could create a dish that satisfied these wild creatures, it would be spoken of across the galaxy. He could become a legend in Xeltara's culinary history. That thought alone was enough to make his skin shift from brown back to a steady green. "I will prepare something," Quilor finally said, his voice firm and confident once more. "But be warned, this dish will be unlike anything you have ever tasted. It will require not just physical resilience, but mental fortitude. I cannot guarantee that all of you will emerge unscathed." Ethan pumped his fist in the air. "That's what I'm talking about." Jennifer, Mara, and Sean exchanged excited glances. "We're ready," Jennifer said with a determined nod. Quilor sighed, more to himself than to them. "Very well, but you must sign a waiver." The humans laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. As the paperwork was quickly drawn up and signed, Quilor disappeared into the kitchen, his mind racing. If the Sorok Viper dish had been enough to warp steel, he would need to step up his game. The answer, of course, was in the Forbidden Pantry, a storage area in the back of the Stellar Feast, where the rarest and most dangerous ingredients in the galaxy were kept. No chef in their right mind would dare use them for casual dining, but Quilor had no choice. These humans had forced his hand. He approached the pantry with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing shelves filled with jars and crates marked with warning labels. The air was thick with the scents of potent spices and chemicals, many of which were known to be lethal in high doses. Quilor's eyes scanned the shelves, and then he saw the Torvian death pepper, a small, spiny fruit that radiated a faint, orange glow. It was banned in several galaxies for its tendency to cause spontaneous combustion when ingested in large quantities. Even handling it required specialized gloves. But Quilor knew this was the only ingredient potent enough to give the humans the spice they craved. He carefully retrieved the pepper and returned to his workstation, laying out his tools with precision. A small crowd of chefs had gathered, curious to see what he would do next. Even the most seasoned of them had never dared to use the death pepper in a dish. "What are you doing?" asked Alicia, a reptilian sous chef whose tail flicked nervously. Quilor didn't answer right away. His focus was absolute, his forearms moving in synchronized precision as he prepared the dish. He diced the death pepper into tiny pieces, careful to avoid inhaling any fumes. He combined it with a sauce made from Heckland fire root, a plant so fiery that its natural oils had to be distilled in a vacuum chamber. The heat emanating from the workstation was already causing the metal counters to warp slightly, but Quilor didn't flinch. He was in his element. As the final dish came together, it glowed faintly, the peppers and spices crackling with latent energy. The scent was unlike anything that had ever graced the Stellar Feast's dining room. It was a mix of tantalizing aromas, both sweet and smoky, but there was an undertone of danger. Even the air around it seemed to shimmer with intensity. With the dish complete, Quilor took a step back and admired his work. It was, by all accounts, a masterpiece. He hadn't just created a dish, he had crafted a weaponized meal that could only be survived by the strongest. He signaled the servers, who cautiously approached the plate. One of them, a small, amphibious creature named Ivo, took one sniff and immediately began coughing, his skin turning a deep shade of purple. I think I need to take my break," Ivo wheezed before hurrying away. Unfazed, Quilor instructed 2 robotic servers to deliver the dish to the humans. As they carried the glowing plate to the table, the dining room fell silent, all eyes locked on the humans who had asked for this insane culinary experience. Ethan clapped his hands together. All right, let's do this. The dish was placed in front of them, and for a moment the humans stared at it, wide-eyed. The heat coming off the plate was palpable, and the faint orange glow gave it an almost otherworldly appearance. I feel like this might be the point of no return, Mara said nervously, though her eyes sparkled with excitement. Jennifer grinned. We didn't come this far just to quit now. Ethan was the first to dig in. He picked up his spoon and scooped up a piece of the dish. The moment the food touched his tongue, his eyes widened in shock. A second later, he let out a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. Holy, this is. Wow, Ethan sputtered, his face immediately turning beet red. The others quickly followed suit, each taking cautious bites before their reactions mirrored Ethan's. Faces turned crimson, eyes watered, and beads of sweat formed on their foreheads. Their bodies shuddered with the intensity of the heat, but they kept going. Quilor watched in disbelief. Not only were the humans eating the death pepper dish, but they were enjoying it. No Selthian would have dared to try such a thing, and yet here they were, this fragile-looking species from a far-off planet, pushing through the pain with sheer determination. Suddenly, Ethan slammed his hand down on the table, causing it to crack slightly under the force. This is the best thing I've ever tasted," he exclaimed, tears streaming down his face. He was practically vibrating with energy, his entire body flushed from the heat. The table itself began to warp again, this time more violently than before. The heat from the dish seemed to be affecting the surrounding furniture, and Quilor could see wisps of smoke rising from the table's edges. We need to evacuate the room," Quilor whispered to his fellow chefs. But it was too late. With a loud pop, the table gave way, collapsing under the intense heat. Plates and utensils clattered to the ground as the humans jumped back, stunned but exhilarated. Quilor rushed forward, his glow now a bright, panicked yellow. Enough. This has gone far enough, he declared, trying to take control of the situation. But to his horror, the humans simply started laughing. As the laughter of the humans echoed through the dining hall, Quilor could hardly believe what was unfolding before his eyes. He was certain that the collapse of the table and the sheer intensity of the dish would have sent them running for safety, or at the very least left them reeling in pain. But instead, these humans were treating it like the most thrilling adventure of their lives. Ethan stood up, his face flushed and his shirt soaked with sweat, yet his grin was wider than ever. "Quilor, my man, you've outdone yourself. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience." The other humans staggered to their feet, still wiping their eyes but beaming with excitement. Mara's hands were shaking as she laughed, while Jennifer was using her scarf to fan herself. Sean, though a little wobbly, simply leaned against the remains of the smoking table and gave Quilor a thumbs up. "We came here looking for spice," Jennifer managed between breaths, "but you delivered. I didn't think it was possible to feel a meal like this." Quilor's skin flickered between bright yellow and deep orange, betraying his inner turmoil. This was unprecedented. He had served beings with iron stomachs, creatures that ate nothing but raw solar energy, and even species that consumed pure plasma as a delicacy. Yet these humans, weak in appearance, with their bizarre sense of adventure, were handling something that should have sent them into shock. Or worse. Quilor had to act. The situation was already spiraling out of control, and the interstellar regulations on customer safety were clear. If anything went wrong, not only could it harm the stellar feast's reputation, it could also cause diplomatic incidents with Earth, a new but rapidly rising player in the galaxy. "I must insist we stop here," Quilor said firmly, stepping forward. "This dish was not meant for any species to consume in such quantities. You may not feel the effects now, but there could be." Before he could finish, a loud rumbling sound cut through the room. The humans froze, and for a moment Quilor thought it might have been one of them having a delayed reaction to the death pepper. But then the rumbling intensified. The walls of the dining room began to shake, and the once celebratory atmosphere turned to confusion. Quilor turned toward the kitchen, and his emerald eyes widened with shock. The Flarian peppers and the Torvian death pepper, left exposed to the air from the preparation process, had begun to interact in ways he hadn't anticipated. Their combined volatile properties were releasing heat energy at an alarming rate. "We have to evacuate now," Quilor shouted. The humans looked confused for a second, then followed his gaze to the kitchen. The walls around the pantry were beginning to glow, and the temperature in the room spiked dangerously high. "What the hell is going on?" Sean asked, trying to shield his face from the sudden wave of heat. "It's the ingredients," Quilor explained hurriedly, already ushering the other chefs and staff toward the exit. "They're reacting. We have to get out before." Before he could finish his sentence, a small explosion rocked the kitchen. Pots and pans clattered to the ground, and a plume of orange smoke began to fill the air. The automated fire suppression system kicked in, but even it seemed to struggle against the intensity of the chemical reaction taking place. The humans stood frozen for a moment, the heat blasting their faces. Ethan wiped his brow, still defiant. "You're saying your kitchen's on fire because of us?" Quilor's glow deepened with frustration. "Not fire. Worse, we are witnessing an uncontrolled energy reaction between the volatile compounds of the peppers. It could destabilize the entire structure." He didn't wait for more questions. Grabbing the closest fireproof cloak, he tossed it to Ethan. "We have to move, now." The humans finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, with the heat becoming unbearable and the walls themselves starting to warp from the intense thermal energy. They scrambled toward the exit, with Quilor leading the way. Behind them, the once pristine kitchen was beginning to collapse into a smoldering ruin. As they ran through the corridors of the stellar feast, the alarm systems blared, and diners from other rooms looked on in confusion and horror. Staff members rushed to control the situation, but it was clear this wasn't a typical emergency. The heat was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. Quilor's mind raced as he led the group toward the safety of the exterior exit. How had this happened? How could such a small combination of ingredients have triggered something this catastrophic? And more importantly, how were these humans still standing after consuming that level of heat? They burst through the large sliding doors and into the open streets of Oldros, where the cool evening air was a welcome relief. Outside, dozens of curious onlookers had gathered, their eyes fixed on the stellar feast as smoke billowed from its windows. The humans, panting and sweating but otherwise unharmed, stood among the crowd, taking in the chaos. Jennifer leaned against Ethan, her legs still shaky from the adrenaline. Mara had pulled out her phone to record the scene, while Sean was inspecting his warped metal spoon, still in disbelief that the food had done that. "Well," Ethan said, turning to Quilor with a grin, "I'd say that was one hell of a meal." Quilor stared at them, utterly dumbfounded. His skin flickered, now hovering between pale yellow and green, unsure whether to be furious or impressed. "You almost destroyed my restaurant," he exclaimed, gesturing wildly to the smoking ruin of the kitchen. Ethan shrugged. "Hey, you told us it'd be spicy. It's not our fault your ingredients had a meltdown." Quilor couldn't believe it. In his hundreds of years as a chef, he had never encountered customers quite like this. There was no fear, no sense of panic. Instead, the humans seemed almost proud of what had happened, as if this culinary catastrophe was a badge of honor they'd carry back to Earth. But just as Quilor was about to launch into a tirade, a new sound interrupted the chaos. A low hum filled the air, followed by the whirring of engines. The crowd parted as a sleek, metallic ship descended from the sky, hovering just above the ground. The emblem on its side was unmistakable. It was a vessel from the Interstellar Union's Regulatory Council. The ship's landing gears engaged, and a tall, stern-looking figure stepped out. His dark eyes immediately locked onto Quilor, and he approached with the unmistakable air of authority. "Quilor of Xeltara," the man said in a clipped voice, "we've received reports of an uncontained culinary incident within the stellar feast. Explain yourself." Quilor froze, his glow dimming to a pale gray. The Union's regulatory agents were notorious for their strict adherence to safety protocols, and this was the last thing he needed: an official investigation. If they deemed him reckless or irresponsible, he could lose his license, not to mention face heavy fines. His reputation, already teetering on the edge from this disaster, could be shattered. Before Quilor could respond, Ethan stepped forward. Hold up, he said, raising his hand. This wasn't Quilor's fault. We may have pushed him a little too far. He told us the dish was dangerous, but we insisted. If anything, it was our bad. The agent raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. Your involvement in this does not absolve him of responsibility. Under the Interstellar Union's Culinary Safety Code, Section 35A, Quilor winced, expecting the worst. But to his surprise, Ethan cut the agent off again, his tone unusually persuasive. Look, I get it. You've got rules. But have you ever had a meal so good, so intense, that it left you speechless? Like literally too hot to handle? That's what just happened in there. And you know what? I bet there's not a single chef in the galaxy who could have pulled it off, except for Quilor. The agent glanced at Quilor, who stood awkwardly beside Ethan, his glow returning to a faint green as he processed what was happening. We'll take full responsibility, Ethan continued, flashing his best winning smile. We humans are crazy like that. But if you ask me, Quilor just created the hottest dish in the universe, and that's got to count for something. The agent stood silently for a moment, weighing the situation. Finally, he let out a slow breath, turning his gaze back to Quilor. I'll be filing a report on this incident, the agent said sternly, but I won't revoke your license. Consider yourself on probation. Quilor's glow brightened in relief. He quickly nodded, his forearms moving in a respectful gesture. Thank you. I will ensure this never happens again. The agent, however, wasn't finished. He turned to the humans with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. You humans, you have an unusual tolerance for danger. I suggest you tread carefully in the future. The galaxy is full of experiences far more hazardous than this. Ethan gave a mock salute. Duly noted. With that, the agent turned and made his way back to the ship, which ascended into the sky and disappeared into the stars. As the crowd began to disperse, Quilor stood silently, the weight of everything sinking in. His restaurant had survived for now, but something else lingered in his thoughts, something unexpected. The humans. Despite all the chaos, they had shown an extraordinary resilience and a bizarre enthusiasm for the most extreme culinary experiences. Quilor had never seen anything like it. They had pushed him to his limits and beyond, and somehow come out the other side laughing. Ethan approached Quilor and clapped him on the back, grinning ear to ear. Hey, next time we're in town, we're hitting up your place again. Think you can top that? Quilor stared at him, and for the first time in hours, he smiled. His skin flickered to a deep, satisfied green. Next time, Quilor said, I'll be ready. As the humans walked away, Quilor stood in the cool Xeltaran night, watching the faint glow of the stellar feast's embers die down. He had nearly lost everything, but in a strange way he had gained something more. He had learned that some beings weren't just customers, they were challenges. And if there was one thing Quilor loved, it was a challenge. And maybe, just maybe, he would be the one to finally craft the perfect dish that even a human couldn't handle. But that was a story for another time. As the humans sauntered off into the night, still buzzing with energy from their fiery meal, Quilor remained standing at the entrance of the stellar feast. The building still smoldered behind him, a quiet reminder of how close he had come to total disaster. His skin had finally settled into a muted green, the color of deep thought. He hadn't just survived this ordeal, he had discovered something completely unexpected. Humans, for all their wild unpredictability, had unlocked a new frontier in his culinary world. Their reckless desire for extreme flavors, their almost nonsensical tolerance for danger, had given Quilor a rare gift, a chance to push the limits of his creativity further than he ever had before. But how far was too far? Inside, his kitchen staff were already hard at work, cleaning up the mess left behind by the Flarian peppers and the volatile death pepper. The dining hall was still in disarray, with warped tables and melted utensils scattered across the floor, but repairs could be made. The damage wasn't permanent. Still, the feeling of unfinished business nagged at him. Quilor had never been the type to leave anything half done, and in this case, the humans had walked away more victorious than he would have liked. They had asked for the spiciest dish he could make, and while they had been pushed to their limits, they hadn't truly broken. There was potential there, potential he hadn't yet fully explored. Quilor turned back toward the kitchen. He had an idea. A few days later, the stellar feast reopened, its structure fully restored and gleaming like nothing had ever happened. The repairs had cost a small fortune, but for a restaurant as prestigious as this, no expense could be spared. Word had already spread across Oldrose and beyond, rumors of an extraordinary meal, one that had nearly destroyed the legendary chef's kitchen, and of a species from the far reaches of the galaxy that had not only survived but thrived on the heat. Curiosity was rising. Other species began arriving, requesting meals that tested their own limits, but none had the same reckless audacity as the humans. While Quilor served his customers with his usual impeccable standards, his thoughts were constantly drifting back to the group that had pushed him further than any other. Then, one evening, his comm link buzzed. The message was short and direct: "We're coming back for round 2. See you soon, Ethan." Quilor's skin rippled with both excitement and apprehension. He had known it was only a matter of time before they returned, but the anticipation of it still sent a surge of adrenaline through his veins. He couldn't help but smile. These humans, they didn't just eat food, they lived it, and that, Quilor realized, was what made them different. When the day finally arrived, Quilor made sure everything was ready. This time, however, he had a new plan. He wasn't going to simply cater to their request for spicier food. He had something far more ambitious in mind. The humans arrived at dusk, just as the twin moons of Xeltara were beginning to rise over the horizon. They strode into the stellar feast with the same confidence as before, their faces lit up with excitement. Ethan led the group, with Jennifer, Mara, and Sean trailing behind, all of them clearly eager for whatever challenge Quilor had in store for them. "Quilor," Ethan called out as he approached the kitchen. "You ready to blow our minds again?" The Xelthian chef stepped forward, his skin now a soft, cool green, the color of calm confidence. "I've been expecting you. I hope you're ready, because tonight will be unlike anything you've experienced before." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Oh, spicier than last time." Quilor smiled, but there was something different in his expression this time, something more calculated. "Not just spicier. Tonight you will face the ultimate culinary challenge." The humans exchanged glances, clearly intrigued. "What's that supposed to mean?" Mara asked, folding her arms. "You will see soon enough," Quilor replied, beckoning them toward a private dining area in the back. "Follow me." The room they entered was different from the main dining hall. It was smaller, more intimate, with a circular table in the center and soft, ambient lighting that seemed to shift with the mood of the room. At the center of the table was a single glowing orb, an advanced holo projector designed to display complex visual simulations. Quilor had had it installed just for this occasion. The humans sat down, their curiosity piqued. "What's all this?" Sean asked, eyeing the orb. "This," Quilor began, "is not just a meal. It is an experience, one that will test more than just your tolerance for heat." Jennifer leaned forward, intrigued. "Go on." Quilor gestured to the orb, and as he did, it flickered to life, projecting an intricate, three-dimensional image into the air above the table. The projection displayed an alien landscape, one of molten lava flows, towering spires of crystal, and swirling clouds of ash and smoke. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a world on the edge of chaos. "Owning this," Quilor said, his voice low and measured, "is the planet Axion 7. It is a world known for its extreme volcanic activity, with temperatures that reach unimaginable levels. The native species that evolved here have adapted to the environment in ways that defy reason. Their biology is attuned to heat and fire in ways that no other species in the galaxy has managed to replicate." The humans watched in awe as the projection zoomed in on a small, lizard-like creature that appeared to be bathing in a pool of molten lava. "These creatures," Quilor continued, "are the key to tonight's meal. I have managed to acquire the rarest and most dangerous ingredient in the galaxy, an Axion flame fruit, harvested from the very heart of this volatile world." The projection shifted to reveal a glowing, red fruit that pulsed with an inner fire. It looked almost alive, as if the heat of the planet itself had been trapped within its core. "This fruit," Quilor explained, is so potent that even touching it can cause burns. It is said that the species of Axion 7 use it as both food and weapon. Consuming it, even in small amounts, can alter one's sensory perception, heightening not just the sensation of heat, but everything else. It is, quite literally, the ultimate spice. For a moment, the room was silent as the humans processed what they had just heard. Ethan finally broke the silence with a laugh. "You're telling us this is going to make last time look like a picnic?" Quilor nodded slowly. "If you thought the death pepper was extreme, this will make it seem like a mere appetizer. The flame fruit's heat is not just physical, it is metaphysical. It will challenge your mind as much as your body." Jennifer bit her lip, her excitement palpable. "We're in." Mara and Sean both nodded in agreement, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. Ethan, however, was as enthusiastic as ever. "Bring it on." Quilor's glow deepened as he moved back toward the kitchen. He had prepared for this moment meticulously, studying the flame fruit's properties and consulting with some of the most daring chefs in the galaxy. This would be a meal unlike anything ever attempted before. When he returned, he carried with him a single, carefully plated dish. The flame fruit was the centerpiece, surrounded by a delicate arrangement of side ingredients, cooling agents, to be precise, designed to balance the fruit's intense heat. But even from across the room, the humans could feel the temperature rise as Quilor approached. The air seemed to shimmer with an almost invisible heat, and the dish itself emitted a faint glow, much like the fruit it contained. Quilor set it down in the center of the table and took a step back, watching as the humans stared at it with a mixture of awe and anticipation. "I will warn you once more," Quilor said, his voice calm but serious. "This is not just a dish, it is a journey. Once you begin, there will be no turning back." Ethan reached for his fork, his grin never wavering. "We didn't come all this way for nothing." With that, the humans dug in. The moment Ethan took his first bite, his entire body tensed, his eyes widened, and for a brief second it looked as if he might choke. But then, something shifted. His expression changed from shock to exhilaration, his face flushed red, and he let out a sound that was part laugh, part groan. "Holy." "This is," Ethan gasped, unable to finish his sentence. Jennifer, Mara, and Sean quickly followed, each taking cautious bites. Their reactions were immediate and intense. It was clear that the flame fruit wasn't just spicy, it was transformative. The heat was so powerful that it seemed to radiate from their very skin, but it wasn't just physical. Their senses were heightened in ways they couldn't describe. Colors grew brighter, sounds more vivid, and time itself seemed to stretch. For a moment, the humans sat there, dazed, their minds grappling with the overwhelming experience. But then, one by one, they began to laugh. It was the same wild, unrestrained laughter as before, pure, unfiltered joy. "This is amazing," Sean managed to say between gasps for air. Jennifer was still fanning herself, but she was smiling through the tears. "I don't even know what's happening anymore." Quilor watched in awe. He had expected them to struggle, perhaps even fail, but once again, these humans had defied all logic. They weren't just surviving the flame fruit, they were thriving on it. As the night wore on, the effects of the flame fruit began to fade, and the humans slowly returned to their normal states, though they still seemed exhilarated by the experience. Ethan leaned back in his chair, looking utterly spent, but completely satisfied. "Quilor," he said, his voice hoarse, "you've done it again." Quilor nodded, his glow soft and serene. "I must admit, I didn't think you would make it through." Jennifer wiped the last of the sweat from her brow. "Neither did we, but damn, was it worth it." As the group stood to leave, Quilor watched them go with a newfound respect. These humans, they were more than just reckless thrill-seekers. They had a spirit, an indomitable drive to push beyond the limits of what was possible. And for Quilor, that made them the perfect challenge. "Will we see you again?" Quilor called after them as they made their way toward the door. Ethan turned and grinned. "Oh, you better believe it. We'll be back, and next time we're bringing friends." Quilor's glow brightened as he watched them disappear into the night. He had faced the ultimate challenge and emerged victorious. But there was one thing he now knew for certain. When it came to humans, there was always more to discover. And for a chef like Quilor, that was the greatest adventure of all. As the humans left the stellar feast, their laughter echoing into the night, Quilor couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had just happened. The meal he had created, the flame fruit dish he had expected it to test the limits of their physical endurance, maybe even break them. Yet not only had they survived, but they had also enjoyed the journey. He stood alone in the now quiet dining room, the remnants of their plates still faintly glowing. For the first time in his long career, Quilor felt something more than pride in his cooking. It was a rare feeling for a Xelthian chef, but one that was unmistakable inspiration. The humans had opened a door he hadn't realized existed. They didn't just want spice for the sensation. They craved experiences, ones that pushed them beyond the edge of reason. And now, Quilor had the tools to create something truly remarkable. For the next few weeks, the stellar feast became a hub of activity. News of the humans' legendary meals had spread far and wide, drawing the attention of curious diners from across the galaxy. Adventurous species flocked to Uldros, each hoping to experience something akin to what the humans had. Some came with hollow bravado, others with genuine curiosity, but none were quite like the original group. They all fell short, either overwhelmed by the intensity or failing to appreciate the deeper meaning behind the challenge. Quilor served them all, perfecting his craft with each new experiment, but the humans were always on his mind. He knew they would return, and when they did, he wanted to be ready with something that would outshine even the flame fruit dish. He wanted to surprise them again, to take them on a culinary journey that they would remember for the rest of their lives. Then, one afternoon, as Quilor was overseeing the preparation of an unusually delicate dish involving vaporized starfish and crystallized kelp, the familiar buzz of his comlink interrupted him. It was Ethan. "We're coming back. This time we're bringing more friends. Get ready." Quilor's skin pulsed with anticipation. More humans? He could hardly contain his excitement. This time it wouldn't just be about spice. No, this time he had something far more elaborate in mind. When the humans arrived, they weren't alone. Ethan, Jennifer, Mara, and Sean had brought along a small group of their friends, a mix of individuals with varying levels of curiosity and courage. Quilor counted 8 in total, each of them eager, but some visibly more apprehensive than others. Among them were Lisa, a petite woman with an infectious energy who claimed to be a professional food blogger, Greg, a heavy-set man who had reportedly competed in Earth's spicy food challenges, and Taylor, a quiet, analytical figure who kept scanning the room with a nervous glance, clearly not as thrilled as the others about the impending meal. Ethan greeted Quilor with his usual enthusiasm. "Quilor, good to see you again, man. I hope you're ready because we've been talking about this non-stop." Jennifer nudged him playfully. "Seriously, I think some of them are more scared than excited," she added, nodding toward Greg, who was already starting to sweat in the cool air-conditioned dining room. Quilor's glow was a steady, excited green. "I've prepared something unique for tonight. It will be unlike anything you've experienced before." Taylor raised an eyebrow. "I've been hearing a lot of stories, but you're not going to melt our faces off, right?" Ethan clapped Taylor on the back. "Oh, trust me, you'll be fine. Probably." Quilor watched them banter for a moment before stepping forward. "Tonight, it is not just about spice. The meal you are about to experience is about balance, sensation, and the interplay of extremes." The group fell silent as Quilor explained the concept. This meal would not just challenge their tolerance for heat, it would engage every sense, pulling them into a symphony of contrasting flavors, textures, and temperatures. He had been experimenting with molecular gastronomy, combined with Xelthian techniques, to create something that would take them on a sensory journey they could never have imagined. "Think of it as an immersion," Quilor said, his skin flickering softly. "Every course will transport you to a different world. The heat, while present, is only a part of the experience." The humans seemed intrigued, if a bit nervous. Quilor led them into a private dining chamber where the lights were dimmed and the ambient sounds of distant waves echoed softly. The table was set with 8 identical plates, each one covered with a smooth, metallic dome. As they sat, Quilor took his place at the head of the table. The first course was revealed with a soft hiss as the domes lifted, unveiling what appeared to be an array of multicolored orbs suspended in mid-air, their surfaces glowing faintly. "These are starfruit bubbles," Quilor explained. "Each one contains a different flavor profile, ranging from the sweetest nectar to the most intense spice. The challenge is in the unknown. You won't know which flavor you're about to experience until it bursts on your tongue." Lisa's eyes lit up with excitement. "This is incredible. I've never seen anything like it." One by one, the humans plucked the orbs from the air, popping them into their mouths. Their reactions were immediate and varied: surprise gasps, delighted giggles, and the occasional shout of shock as a particularly fiery bubble burst with a heat unlike anything they had anticipated. Greg, after biting into one of the spicier orbs, wiped his forehead and laughed nervously. That one was intense. Quilor smiled but said nothing, watching closely as they moved through the course. The balance of flavors was working, just as he had intended. As the meal continued, each dish grew more complex, blending sensations of heat and cold, bitter and sweet. One course involved thin slices of an intergalactic mushroom that changed texture as it was chewed, while another featured a broth that shifted colors with each sip, its flavor evolving on the palate. But the heat, always present, always lurking, continued to build subtly. By the time the final course arrived, Quilor could see the humans were both exhilarated and exhausted, their senses heightened to a degree they hadn't experienced before. Yet, through it all, they had endured. Even Taylor, who had been hesitant at first, was now smiling, though clearly still recovering from some of the hotter elements of the meal. Ethan leaned back in his chair, visibly impressed. "Quilor, I've got to hand it to you, you've outdone yourself. This wasn't just a meal, it was an event." The others nodded in agreement, murmuring their approval. But Quilor wasn't finished. "Before we conclude," he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "there is one final offering. It is not part of the official menu, it is a test." The humans exchanged curious glances. "This," Quilor continued, "is the culmination of my studies. The most intense, most dangerous spice in the known universe, far beyond even the flame fruit." He stepped forward and revealed a small, unassuming dish. At its center was a single, tiny black pepper. It looked innocuous, but the air around it seemed to ripple faintly, as if reality itself was bending under its influence. "This is the void pepper," Quilor said, his glow dimming slightly. "It is said that even the bravest of warriors hesitate to consume it. The spice is not just a sensation, it is an experience of the mind and body. Only those with the greatest resilience can survive it." For a moment, the table was silent. Even Ethan, who had been fearless throughout, seemed to falter as he looked at the small pepper on the plate. "Only one of you may try it," Quilor added. "The choice is yours." Ethan looked around the table, clearly torn between his competitive nature and the very real danger Quilor had presented. Finally, Jennifer reached across the table and placed her hand on the plate, gently pulling it toward her. "I'll do it," she said quietly, her eyes locked on the pepper. "I came here to push my limits, and this is it." Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but he quickly closed it, nodding in silent respect. Quilor stepped back, watching closely as Jennifer picked up the void pepper. She took a deep breath, her expression steeled with determination, and then without hesitation popped it into her mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. The room was deathly quiet as everyone watched, waiting for some kind of reaction. Then, Jennifer's eyes widened. Her entire body shuddered, her skin flushing bright red as a visible ripple of heat seemed to pass through her. She clutched the edges of the table, gasping as the intensity of the spice hit her like a wave. Sweat poured down her face, and her breathing became ragged, but still somehow she didn't cry out. Quilor's glow shifted to an anxious yellow. This was it, the final test. For what felt like an eternity, Jennifer remained locked in place. Every muscle in her body tensed as she fought to control the overwhelming sensation. Then, slowly, her breathing steadied. She let go of the table, leaned back in her chair, and closed her eyes. When she finally opened them again, her expression was calm. "I did it," she whispered, a small, triumphant smile spreading across her face. The others let out collective sighs of relief, clapping and cheering softly as Jennifer wiped the sweat from her brow. Quilor stepped forward, his glow returning to a deep, satisfied green. "You have passed the ultimate challenge," he said quietly. "You are extraordinary." Jennifer smiled weakly. "Thanks, Quilor, but I think that's enough spice for a lifetime." Ethan laughed, clapping her on the back. "You're a legend, Jen. I don't think anyone could top that." Quilor stood silently for a moment, watching the group as they celebrated Jennifer's victory. He had done it. He had created a meal that would be spoken of for generations, a culinary experience that had pushed even the most adventurous species to their absolute limit. But as the humans left that night, laughing and congratulating each other, Quilor couldn't help but feel a sense of completion. He had reached the pinnacle of his art, and for now that was enough. Yet, in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that there were always new challenges, new flavors to discover. And with a species like humans, there would always be someone willing to take the next step. As Quilor stood alone in the quiet of the stellar feast, his glow settled into a peaceful green. His journey wasn't over.